Thank you all for being here. Thank you for the year that we've shared together. And this is our last session for the year. So we thought we'd have a little bit of a reflective, focus today, as opposed to just opening up another topic, which we will do when we come back. Now, in case anyone needs to leave the call a little earlier, I thought I'd sort of work backwards and explain when is the next webinar going to be, right? So with the break in January and just a few things that are on, it's a little tricky. So we have Australia Day. We would normally start back up again at the end of January, but that happens to be Australia Day. And it wouldn't be very Australian of us to ignore that. So we're going to stay out until the 1st and the 2nd of February. So the 1st of February in the US and the 2nd of February in Australia. So you'll see the invites come out in the second half of January, but we all get a really good break. And I guess that will help us look forward to coming back together again at the beginning of February. I've had a lot of nice comments from people about how much they appreciate these webinars, both the content of the webinars, but also the community that they feel of, people they've now already developed trust and awareness and a relationship with, and in many cases have never even met in person. It's pretty amazing. So of course we'll keep these going through 2023, and just make a note that you'll get a good holiday break in January, and we start up again on the 1st and the 2nd of February, back to the same rhythm. And we have a great topic on leadership, and the topic is pretty much going to be around, we've talked about high performance teaming and what teams need to be focused on now that we're in a more of a hybrid and virtual world. And even some of my understanding there has evolved just in the last couple of weeks as we continue working with some really awesome teams. But we're going to focus on leadership at the 1st of February. Like what does leadership, how does that need to adjust, given that we're working in a different world? And it's not just about whether you're in leadership positions in terms of having people reporting to you. If you want to lead and be influential and cast your shadow and make a difference in the world, what are the sorts of things to be thinking of as we go into 2023, using lessons learned from the last 2 to 3 years with the way the world has shifted. So I think that's a great way to kick off the year, and we'll be doing that on the 1st and 2nd of February. Any questions, comments, suggestions before we get into today's discussion? All right, so today is our discussion, and this isn't so much me sharing ID content with you. I'll try and sprinkle in ID relevant insights as we go through the meeting, and especially if you have your ID, which I can see I haven't done, your ID in your name. That always helps us understand or hear you maybe a little differently when you talk, because we can relate to your ID and see, the nuances of what you're expressing. So what we want to do is just talk about, what have you learned? What stood out to you? What are you taking with you in 2023? Have there been particular insights about yourself, about the world, about leadership that you're conscious of wanting to focus on in 2023? And especially if there's things you've learned that you want to let go of from, again, from the learnings of this past year. So I'll see if anyone's keen to share something first, because we did put this in the invite, and I thought, well, I'll see if anyone has something they want to share first.
I have a heart full of sharing.
Then let's get started, Judy.
I want to take with me and develop hugely the habit of being curious. I have been learning that when I'm curious, I feel better. I feel lighter. I feel uplifted. And for me at this point, when I'm not curious, then I'm judgmental. When I'm judgmental, I'm heavy. I don't feel good. I get sick. All kinds of things like that. And I've been thinking about this a lot because I feel like I'd like more curiosity, and I feel, and I'm really watching my language also. And I feel like throughout my lifetime, I have used up a lot of my quota and inventory of judgment. So I'd like to just, take that judgment and put it someplace, I don't know where.
How hard are you finding that to do, to be more curious? I'm curious because with your ID as an avoid verifier who's normally into acceptance, if that's your instinct, I'm wondering what sort of effort it is for you, or how you're working it so that you now are more curious.
Well, I hadn't thought about the avoid verify. Where I really where this really came from was the worry and the stress that comes from primarily my high complete drive.
Right.
And I am very tired of worrying and stress and sickness and all of that kind of thing. So I've just been brainstorming, and I hadn't thought about the acceptance. I don't want to accept what comes naturally to me, so to speak. I want to be curious about what I can create and what I have control of. Because the other thing I feel when I'm in the stress and worrying, I feel like I'm not in control, and that doesn't feel good.
So thank you, Judy. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for sharing so honestly and vulnerably. For all of you who are always interested in learning about ID, it's always fascinating to me. Like in Judy's case, even though she is an avoid verify, her strongest drive by far is that 7 incomplete. That's because there's no strong avoid drive. We call someone who's got no 3, 2, or 1. If 4 is their lowest score in any of the other drives, we call the 7 a 70. And the reason we do that is when I was first developing the ID, I found that so in most conversations, when I was talking to someone about their, it could have been the verify that was a 7, it could have been the authenticate that was a 7 with no other strong avoid drive. People would say to me, oh my God, that person's not a 7. They're off the Richter, they're off the scale. That's like a 70. And I found that comment a lot. So then I started testing it, and I found an absolute. And by absolute, I mean that 100% of the time, I got the same feedback. And even ultimately, the person would say things to me like, I've always felt like a bit of a freak. I've always felt that I was so different to everyone else. I've always felt that even amongst the other people that were organizers, I was the penultimate organizer. I was fanatical. I was paranoid. They would use language that was like off the Richter, for me, like very extreme. And so we refer to that ID as a 70. And what's really liberating for people that have it is they've finally got a way of coming home to themselves, of sort of going, oh, so nothing's wrong with me. That's just who I am. And then it's about, if you are so unique, how do you then find the niche for your knack? How do you then recalibrate your expectations of yourself, the things you do, the relationships you're in, so that they actually marry to your drive? And so then bringing it back to Judy, what you'll find is that anytime you're looking for answers, you always look through your strongest drive. And even though I was looking at acceptance and the avoid verify, Judy straight away said, I was thinking of the worry, which is the complete drive, right? So it's just really profound to me how it's always that strongest ID that gives us the guidance first. So what I'm hearing you say, Judy, sorry, I can see you want to say something, is that the judgment causes you to worry. Because if you stay curious, you don't have to go to any judgment place. You can just let that lay. Is that right?
Kind of. That's what I'm figuring out. But when you were talking, I had a thought come back that I hadn't thought about for a long time. This occurred, what came back to me was probably in 1995. And a person that I had just met before that said to me, "You are so intense."
There you go.
And I thought, me? Intense? I could not see it. And I'm just now, as a result of the idea and what I know, I'm beginning to see it. I still don't see it. I don't think I'm intense at all.
Isn't it beautiful? I just, you are so inspiring. My wish for myself is that when I get to 80 duty, I have the same passion for personal growth and still making a difference in the world as what you do. It's been a real joy to get to know you and share these sessions with you. Thanks for sharing.
Oh, thank you.
What about somebody else? And I'm particularly interested if anyone's had a year this year that was totally different to what they were expecting in terms of things that occurred and the learnings that emerged for you.
I'd like to follow up with Judy. Is my microphone working?
Yes, it is, Greg.
It's this idea of being curious. Many of you know, I call that stay stupid longer.
Yeah.
And I've been practicing that more and recognizing how I might not say something out loud, but my head inside goes, "Oh, what a load of crap." And I've been catching that internal voice and recognizing that that's a way of still feeding it. And I'm changing quickly what I say to myself and cleaning it up somehow and going, okay, back off. All right. And it's constant cleaning up. And, but I'm loving it because I realize how often I go into some judgment and I'm not neutral. And then I react to my judgment rather than what's really happening. So I've been watching the ability to stay more neutral and not draw the gun so quickly. And it's calming me down and getting me more information because it's less about how I'm feeling and what it's done to me and more about, well, again, attention out. So this idea of neutral or saying, curious to me is very, very powerful.
Greg, where are you getting the feedback from? Are you getting the feedback? Is this from your own dialogue with yourself or are you getting it from other people? Where is that coming from?
Yeah, like right now, if I could have done I just said that. Weren't you listening? So I'm going to have it right in my head right now, right? And it's related to this thing I was watching George Harrison's tribute they did years ago, and he was the concert. And he was singing the song about "Oh My Lord" and so forth, and it hit me during the concert that the Lord part. I thought to myself, what if that Lord was the higher self me? What if I want to be with you, Lord. It's been so long, Lord. And I was mentioning with Vera, she said, and I'm going, what if that Lord thing for me was my higher self, and I'm missing you, and I want to stay in touch with you. Then I'm having my higher self hear me and going, and so that's what I've been doing. I've been going, and I just go, hang on, higher self, and so I'm hearing me talk to me and cleaning it up in the moment because. My higher self's going, come on, Greg.
That's good. That's good. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
So this is Patricia. I don't know if you guys can hear me okay. If you can't, I will talk. Okay.
We can.
So Greg, what you just said, I'm like, oh shit, I gotta start doing that. Because what happens with me, my inside speak, I was with a group of women friends of mine, and one of the ladies was doing something that I just thought was like not so smart. And in my mind, I'm like, really, you're doing that. And they said, your face showed everything. And I was like, oh crap, I need to start like dialing not only back my self-talk or the bad talk, but also how my face reveals it. So something I will strive for in 2023.
And for those who don't know, Patricia, your ID is 3737, right, Patricia?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So a similar style to Greg. So I guess that's why you certainly related to what Greg was sharing. I wondered a similar thing actually for both of you, you and Greg, was, as you were saying that, there's what you think you're not saying, but being the authenticator, my experience, certainly of you, Greg, is you might be thinking that, but some of us can still see it on your face or in your in your silence or whatever. So it's still worthwhile cleaning it up, and it's still worthwhile being present to it. But I think the strength of the authenticator is they say, I wear my heart on my sleeve. And I often think of it, we all carry some sort of burden with our ID, not just a vulnerability, but something we go, oh, I wish I could hide that sometimes. And, you know, I would imagine for an authenticator, it's that you wear your heart on your sleeve. Like, you can't hide whatever the feeling is that's going on inside. You can't hide it, even though you do your darndest to try and be more self-aware and, you know, kinder about it. And it still is helpful, but I would imagine the transparency must frustrate you at times.
Yeah, but you know, sorry, Pat.
I was going to say for me, and I did not even know I.
Go, Patricia. Patricia, you go.
Okay. I did not even realize I was doing it. They told me that I rolled my eyes 3 times at this person. I didn't even know I was doing it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and I do it even when no one's around. When I'm thinking about it, I do it even then. And that's getting better practice. And whatever my face is doing doesn't matter then. But it's the catching it. And even if I'm with someone, if I catch it, my face will change when I catch it. So because I'm going, and I'll go, sorry. And so it's just a real constant awareness thing without any effort, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Greg.
Can I just add to that? At least you don't have the 7 in verify that goes with that. So I'm sorry, it's really tough.
Being the self-criticism, Leonie, is that what you're referring to?
Yes, absolutely, the self-criticism. And thanks, Judy, for sharing, because it's given me insight into how I perceive potentially judgment coming from another person who is high complete. And I'm perceiving it as judgment, and I'm getting caught up in that. And it's probably actually not judgment in the same way I'm feeling it as judgment. But yes, it's self-criticism, but it's also just, you know, if I think someone's done something that's incredibly not practical at all, or not helpful at all, or whatever, then, you know, I go into judgment mode pretty quick. I've really got to stop.
Okay. Thank you.
And I can't hide, and sometimes I can't hide it. So that's okay with people, you know, because I've educated them and they understand, and they get where the intention is and whatever. But for people I don't know, you know, and if I don't know I'm doing it, really hard.
Wow. Well, it's not only not knowing that you're doing it, it's also not knowing the effect on someone else. So, for example, I've had times where, as a verifier, I'm asking questions, and they're pure questions. I mean, they're not judgments, they're pure curiosity questions. But to the person on the other side, they can feel like I'm criticizing or I'm lacking trust. So there's even with a pure heart, it still doesn't mean it lands as kindly to the person on the other end. And so awareness there's a self-awareness about yourself, but there's also a self-awareness about how your natural style then lands on people who are similar and different to you, you know. And that's been a fascinating journey for me, especially around that, well, the verified drive, but also, you know, my strongest drive is my one in authenticate. So the number of times that I think something is obvious, so there's no point saying it. I feel like to actually say it would be like demeaning to the other person, you know, because it's so obvious that there's no, like, it's like saying, well, are you breathing at the moment? You know, it's like, of course, no one needs to talk about that. But I find out later that it wasn't so obvious, and therefore people felt blindsided or somehow, you know, set up for failure, whether it's in communication or in the activity they're doing or whatever. So we all have that. And I think it's really, really valuable as you learn about yourself to also learn about the effect of yourself on somebody else. Even to Greg's point about even when you're coming from a higher place, just because you're coming from a place of love, it doesn't mean the other person is receiving you from a place of love. Just could even be because of their own stuff. I have a question going back to the 70 conversation, because I realize we have a couple of people on the call that Michael, you're one of them. You've got a 4547, and Maddie, I see you as 5457. And I thought it'd be interesting to ask you, with what we were saying before about that 7, how strong it is and how different it can make you feel. I'm not sure how long your history has been with ID, but I'm curious whether or not, as you learned about it and learn about the intensity of it, what that was for you. Did it resonate that there was, it sort of explained or put words on something you knew about yourself but couldn't articulate so easily? What has it meant for you? Michael, I might start with you.
Yeah, I'll share, because I was actually going to mention that next. Like, oh, if there's a gap, I'm going to raise my hand, because it makes me laugh. I'm an instructional designer, so ID means something completely different. Every time you say ID, it's like, oh, I've been doing that for like years. So my company offered this, and I took it, and it blew my mind, because many of you, I suppose if you're in a similar number combo, it starts out by saying less than 2% of the general population are driven this way. And at first I thought, oh, great. Well, I've always been told I'm special or indifferent, but in this setting, after I read it, it was an eye opener, because for me, I'll have a night, somebody will mention, oh, could you do something? And the entire city plan, the whole floor plan, everything just pours out in front of my mind, and it's there that fast. And then I'm like, you can't see this? Why can't you see this? And I'll sit there, and the best thing it's taught me was I didn't feel bad about being in the 2%. What I loved was knowing I was in the 2% and where I was losing people, because I'd have to stop and say, okay, even though I can see it, there are 4 roads, and this road goes here, and this one, I have to back it up and and learn to spell it out in a great way. The funny thing is, my buddy who helped me get hired here, I convinced him he should take it, and he's a 5.447, almost identical. And the funny thing is, the 2 good things with that is our VP has learned, put these 2 people together and just let them brainstorm, and don't interrupt, just let them. And we have come up with a bunch of big changes, like, well, what if we did this? What if we did that? But the funny thing is, we can see each other's map because we've been friends for 30 years, and we know each other, but we both have that same vision that pops up when one of us. And so when we're brainstorming, we're building this whole village in one shot. So it's funny, we'll joke like, isn't it great for you and me to be so alike, just like almost no one else? So it's fantastic, because it's also, we joke like that's why we're friends, because we're able to we're able to just connect brains. But it was wonderful to also realize everyone else they can't keep up, and my job is to slow it down, break it into chewable chunks, paint the picture, but show them the colors of the paint that I'm using. And so that's been a huge help.
Oh, that's really cool. Thank you for sharing that, Michael. Good to hear that. And I'm sure it's helpful for others who are still learning about the nuances of ID to hear it from you as well. So thank you. And Maddie, what about for you?
Yeah, just piggybacking kind of off that point, I have had somewhat similar experiences in realizing, receiving my ID number, that my thought process and like work ethic doesn't necessarily align with who I'm working on or working with for different projects. And Michael, how you were saying, sometimes you have to take a step back. I've found myself realizing how easily I can get frustrated with that it's not easy for me right away to understand, why aren't we not on the same page, or why can't we both complete this and get to point B, the same way. But definitely something that I would like to go into the new year with is getting better with taking that step back and dialing down my frustrations to see, there is so many things another ID might have to offer that, I'm not seeing or is not on my plate, and just really trying to ease those frustrations with not always being on the same page with those numbers.
Okay. Was it a surprise to you when you got your ID?
It was. I actually, the first time I took it was like inconclusive. It was a while back now that I had taken it. So I had taken it, it said, sorry, it was, too close or something like that, and to retake it. So I had to take it twice. And in that second time, once I read through, I was like, that it does make sense. I do see it very clearly there.
Okay. Well done. Thank you for sharing.
Maddie, I have to wonder for you, it's like, I'll sit there and like, all of a sudden it's there and then I'll go, here's your new house plan. I just designed your whole house. Let's go build it. And they're like, whoa. How many bedrooms does it have? It has enough.
Yeah.
It has
Yeah,
how much
like
closet space. Of course there's closets. Let's build. I'm like, can I look at the floor plan? Trust me.
yeah.
Trust
And
me.
yeah, definitely like sometimes in my mind, I'm skipping those steps to get to that final point. And that's where the frustration can kick in, where it's like, well, no, I did walk through, those steps just very differently and, came to this conclusion. And so I definitely something I'm relate to and hoping to work on and improve on there.
Thank you for sharing, guys. It's helpful. I think a lot of people, when they first learn about ID and they hear the concept of the 70, it's sort of a little bit scary, like, can you talk as openly about someone's intensity? But it's actually, because it's who the person is, you're actually talking to them in their language when you talk like that, so even though, to Judy's point, it's not that they have necessarily felt that intense, but they can certainly feel a difference between their way and others around them. Not that they would have thought of it as intensity necessarily, but I find that people are rarely surprised. And I remember one lady in particular, I remember her name was Gail, but I can't remember her last name. And I remember her being in tears, saying to me, and she must have been 50 something, like she'd been around for a while, and she said, you're the first person that's ever truly understood me. And I remember thinking, wow, I don't even think I understand you yet. Like I feel still somewhat superficial. But for her, it was a part of her that she'd found really hard to describe. So it's always made me really sensitive and empathetic to the uniqueness of that 70 drive. All right. One of the things that has come up a lot as the world has shifted to this more nimble COVID hybrid world is the concept of boundaries and how boundaries have shifted. Meaning back in the day, 3 years ago, people drove to work and drove home from work, and the very notion of commuting imposed a boundary. But now that we can work from home and we've got technology that allows us to do so, let alone employers that allow or require us to do so, the notion of boundaries has become challenging for many people because no one else is making that happen. You've got to do that yourself, and yet there's still as many or more demands on you. I'm wondering whether people have learned something about how they've done boundaries, and maybe particularly if you felt challenged at first and you've had to weather through frustration or stress and ill health or some other means, friction in relationships, you've had to get to the point where you now operate with different boundaries to what you had before, as one of the lessons learned and one of the things that you might be taking with you into how you do 2023. Maybe you haven't got there yet, but it's something you want to focus on. I'm just curious whether anyone's got some sort of aha in that they would like to share with the group.
Well, Paul, I can share. I'm a 2 in complete. I'm very aware that 2 is definitely in the driver's seat with its hands on the steering wheel.
Well,
And
it's distracted with everything else too, right?
yeah, exactly. And I'm also aware that for me, freedom is everything. And so everything has a workaround. And so the boundaries, if I feel like there's any boundaries, I will figure out a way around, through, over it, for the sake of freedom.
So Pam, as a 2 in complete, and maybe, Susie, Greg, other people that are really strong avoiding lists, you might want to think, are boundaries helpful to you? Do you need them at all? Or are they a kryptonite to you? Or are some actually essential for you?
So even it's interesting because for me, even the word boundaries
that just makes me sweat. It just is, it's similar to, I was thinking earlier about Judy's sharing, and the words that you use, the language you use. Freedom is more motivating for me. Boundaries is where I just want to go, what? For Judy, the harmony piece of complete, and using the words like harmony can be better and access better parts of you. And I do realize that's resistance for me when I start to feel like I'm losing freedom.
So you know what people mean by boundaries, Pam. So whatever word, my question would be, do you need anything like that? Whether it's boundaries, whether it's structure, do you need anything like that? But you would use a different word for it. I don't know what it is, but I'd be curious.
So my top of mind answer for that would be, that's where my 7 in improvise kicks in, and I need more structure when things become too complicated.
Okay. Thank you. Let's hear from a couple of others. Greg, do you have anything to add?
Oh, I wrote it in the chat. Yeah, I like boundaries when they make things smoother, quicker, or keep people out of the way. Like there's a rule here or there's a process here. I want my spices handy, and I want things that are really easy to work with. And I would call that a boundary. And that when they're out of whack, I go but I put them there. I think that's the key. Is that and or other people say this is it, and I go, okay, that's not mutable. Good. Now let's get creative within that. So a client says, now we have to do it on the Tuesday. Okay, what can we do? So I'd actually like it because they narrow down all the different paths I can go on. And like Pam says, and there's always a workaround.
Right. Thank you. Susie, what about for you?
Yeah, I agree with both Greg and Pam. It is more so with Pam in that, to me, the word boundary does feel very stifling. But I agree with Greg in that having some processes, and the ones that either I've built, for example, I've got a bunch of lists that keep me on track throughout the day and things like that. So I don't see that as a boundary though, so that's why I really do resonate with what you're saying, Pam. It's a word, and it does create, for me, it creates one kind of motion of, oh, okay, well, let me see how I can, get around that. It's almost like a challenge. It's like game on. I've heard the word boundary, but then in a way, it also, it does, it's like having some train tracks to be on. And that's not such a bad thing. You don't really want to see, a massive locomotive going off the rails, because that's kind of like how it does end up figuratively. But yeah, so I definitely need them, but I think finding a better word and better language around it works best.
Thank you.
Paul, you used a really good expression the other day. I saw you in a workshop, and you referred to watch out for the electric fences when you were describing avoid complete, and it seemed to resonate with the team that we were talking to. I know it's not most positive, but it was like, just watch out. It's like everything else is fine, but just watch out for the electric fences. They're going to give you a jab.
Thank you for reminding me.
Well, can I just add to that? So sitting here laughing because listening to Greg and Pam and Susie and hearing myself, but I think the thing I find is when I put frameworks in place and boundaries in place, I actually end up feeling that gives me more freedom. So, and I talk a lot about a bit like that fence at the top of the cliff versus the ambulance at the bottom, because I feel that if you plan it, and in a weird way, that planning and that structure gives me far more freedom and far more ability to make different choices and more choices. So that's how I use that particular aspect of it all. And can I just say this morning, 2 things this morning that have really struck me when you said before about being a 1 in authenticate, and the fact that something's so obvious that you don't even say it. I actually had never got that about an avoid authenticate, and that just makes so much sense to me, because I'm like, can't you see that? It's just so clear.
And then the avoid authenticates are not talking about it. And I'm like, why not? Because they're going, yeah, of course I can see it. I don't have to talk about it. But I didn't even get that, right? And then the other thing is about the, oh shit, I forgot that, but great, a really great learning for me. So thank you. Even after 20 years, still love those insights.
Good. Thank you, Joe. Does anyone have anything else that they want to share? If not, I have an ID learning I would share with you.
Amanda's got a hand up, Paul.
Oh, great. Thank you, Amanda. You do too.
Hey everyone, sorry, I'm just feeling sick, so I don't have my video on. But I just have a question actually for all of you guys, high improvisers and avoid completers. So we're going on a very long trip next week to Canada with a 1-year-old. And it's going to be a 15-hour straight flight. And I'm like planning a couple of things and obviously going to have enough food for him and whatever. But Joe, my husband, 2738, he's like so invested in trying to plan absolutely everything and what hours Josh is going to sleep. And he bought all these new toys and all sorts of things. And I'm trying to look at his idea and go, are you just trying to avoid a negative situation? Like what drive is driving him to make sure this is a smooth plane trip, which is something I think I would usually do, but we've got no control over what he's doing. I'm just finding it funny that if you never met him, you would think, he's a high completer and trying to avoid problems on the plane and whatever. So I wonder if it's got anything to do with what Greg was saying in terms of you like structure when it means things are going to run smoother for you. If anyone has any tips.
I do actually have a comment to that. It's very interesting, and thank you for bringing that up, Amanda. So for me, as an avoid complete, I spent most of my years waiting, never showing up early because I didn't want to be bored, and even having to wait 5 minutes to be bored. So I think of different ways I could fill in the gaps of time so that nothing would be boring and things would keep happening. And that's the gaps in time are what I found over the years have been the thing I've had to work on the most. The first time somebody ever asked me to go to Mexico and just lie on the beach, I felt like I'd rather just commit suicide than to go do that, because I just couldn't imagine how that would work out for me. Since then, I've learned and I've matured that I like that. However, there's still ways I need to fill in the gaps of time. Hope that helps.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Pam.
So I was sitting here listening to you, Amanda, thinking there could be a couple of motives. One is, it'd be nice to think that he's just been so attuned to your ID. He's trying to do all of those things just to help you be as planful and cover all the bases as much as you possibly, would want done. But then again, you've probably got all that sorted anyway. So the other reason I think you nailed it, avoiding the negativity. I don't understand this, but I've noticed when we've had friends over and they've had IDs like Joel. So I'll say someone like Joe, who is like 2728. When their kids started mucking up, which to me, they weren't even mucking up that much. They were just being like, maybe they were whingy or they were upset, and the parents were like, come on, we've got to go now. And it's not everyone with that ID, but I've noticed there've been a few people that instead of just either sorting it out or disciplining the kids or just dealing with it, they want to escape, like they want to get away. And I don't know whether it's they want to change of scenery, to change it all up, but it was like what they maybe perceived as a negative situation in public seemed to be like they're
disappointing people, right? I've got a feeling like he just doesn't want people, because it's in public, he doesn't want people around him thinking negative of him, like that he's disappointing people around him that don't even know him, whereas I don't really care if people, like, he's a baby, what can I do? Like, I'm not really fussed about that. I don't need to impress people around me that I don't even know. And I feel like Joe has that need sometimes. I don't know if that comes from the improvise.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
it might have something.
Can I just? Oh, sorry. I was just going to quickly respond to that, Joe. For me, it's about, and I could absolutely see that. And I don't have kids, but I have had kids in my life at times. It's like I just want to get out so that I can manage the situation again. And I think, and I was reflecting on why, and I was thinking maybe it's about impact. It's about that negative impact piece. Even though I don't really care what other people think about me in many situations, sometimes if I want, it comes back to a little bit of a need for control and managing the situation. And I think some of that, if I put it back to the ID, might come back to the impact that I'm having or that we're having.
Right. Well, and it's interesting because it's one of those things, like I said before, is what you're imagining that it's having a negative impact, but the people on the receiving end aren't necessarily feeling that way at all. It's a bit like Amanda said, oh, it's a baby, you expect them to cry, there's no problem at all, but it's different to what you might be thinking in yourself.
I think it might have something to do, like Joe said, I think it might have something to do with the impact, but more importantly, the judgment with the avoid verify, like feeling like they're out of control, not a good parent. But I suspect that's where it's coming from, Amanda, that he just doesn't want to be judged, God forbid it, with a 2 in the verify.
Yeah, that's it, Vicky. Yeah, that's it as well. Wow. Yeah. No judgment. Cool. All right, now I've got to create a plan around that so that I can manage Joe on the plane.
Well, have the best trip, Amanda. I hope you better by
Yeah,
the
have
time.
a fabulous time.
Thanks, everyone.
And Amanda, I was just going to say it comes back to that fence at the top of the cliff rather than the ambulance at the bottom. It's so that we can continue to have fun and we don't actually have to worry about what's going on, because that just brings us down. So it's like, oh, damn, now I've got to deal with the situation, rather than if I plan. And this is where the beauty of the ID comes in. Even though you think an avoid complete or whatever doesn't want to plan, we plan all right, but we plan because of a different motivation. And a lot of time it's just because it's going to make life easier, and it means that we can have more fun and more freedom rather than having to worry about dealing with crap as it goes along the way. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Joe. Maybe I'll just give a sleeping tablet to Joe, and then he'll have fun while he's sleeping, and I just wake him up when we get there.
Oh, that's not fair.
No, thanks so much, everyone. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. So I have a question for the avoid improvisers. And this is a learning for me. This would be my latest ID learning. This occurred to me like a week ago. I think I'd always thought that whilst we say the improvisers are into the possibilities and the opportunities, that they see, I think without even thinking about it, I had just thought that, well, everyone sees the possibilities. The difference is the improvisers are willing to run with them, and the avoid improvisers don't, because they see the risks associated with them. And it's just occurred to me a week or so ago that it's not that we don't even get that far, that some of the things that I see as possibilities are not even visible to an avoid improvise. So that if they were, then there's still the next thing about, well, there are risks associated. But it's occurring to me now that part of the talent of being so diligent as an avoid improviser, what makes you be able to get the stuff done that's not sexy and all of that, is because your mind just doesn't even go to the other possibilities that are there, let alone whether there are risks about them and not doing them. And I don't know if I'm right, but I'm curious, for those of you who are avoid improvise, what your response is to that. And I don't mean you don't ever see any possibilities, but I'm just saying, as a general rule of thumb, how would you explain what happens for you? And Dennis, I'm even thinking of someone like yourself who's been, it's been nice seeing you on some of our calls and getting to know you. But as someone who's new to ID, and I look at your particular ID, and I'm like, okay, how does that relate for someone like you? Does that Does that resonate, or does it not seem like that? What are you thinking?
It does. And I like to have things laid out and know the as I look at the possibilities, going through the different scenarios, before I hastily approach something. I am more of a linear thinker. So that's my comfort zone, right?
Yep.
So, but I can be malleable under the right circumstances. It's all in how someone approaches me and how they communicate it to me.
Right.
But, and I know that that's a blind spot for me that has to, there's occasions where I have to be more flexible and gray, for lack of a better word, to get things done and to function in certain situations, right?
That's good. Thank you. I've found that it has so much to do with the way people would approach you.
Mm-hmm.
Someone with your ID, not so much what the thing itself is, but the way they approach you to it, approach you with it, I should say.
And,
I think go on, Leanne.
I was just going to say that I think it's also the impact of the other drives. So I think that I see more possibilities when, so for example, if it's things around practicality or being helpful or whatever, I'll see more possibilities there. Or is the problem solving, I'll see more possibilities in that space. But I won't necessarily, I'm not the creative brainstormer. I'll take someone else's idea. I won't come up with the idea necessarily. But if it's related to solving a problem, I'm more likely to be able to come up with an idea.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Lana.
And I think conversely to that, I would say, I look at it and go, well, what's the worst could happen? Does it matter? Is it a priority? Is it important? And it's almost like, can it be undone? Yep. Okay, fine. I'm good. And it's pretty quick, that decision. I think, for me, I just assess it as an important, as a priority, can be undone. Yep, we can fix it if we need to. No, I'm good. And let's move forward. So that's how I would sort of associate it with. But again, there's my 8 and 6 coming through. So yeah.
Yeah, and as I hear you guys talk, I'm thinking that what happens for an improviser is, as you're talking, it sounds like there are possibilities that are linked to the thing. So if you've got a scenario or a situation, then you can think about possibilities connected to that. I think what happens for an improviser is your mind is so sort of open that the possibilities just come like flashlights going off, or like sort of just going off, and they're not seemingly connected at all. So they're very disconnected or very futurized, but there's still possibilities, that sort of pull you into that future, but they're not necessarily automatically, like they're not coming from where you're at going forward. They're almost got nothing to do with it, but they pull you into it. I don't even feel like I'm explaining that the right way, but or in a way that makes sense, as opposed to when I heard, like, say, Dennis talking and you talking, and you can like sort of say, okay, what are all the possible scenarios here? Because there's like the ones that are linked to what could go wrong or what you need to factor in. But my mind just starts thinking of all sorts of other stuff that you didn't even ask for. Just the ideas just come, but you're still not only willing to explore them, they're actually really exciting. And then it's occurring to me that there's a certain number of those that are just not even visible to the avoid improvise person. So it's not that they're rejecting them or shutting down because they're too risky. They're not even apparent in the first place. That's how it feels to me. But I don't
Paul,
know.
To build on that, I think too is like you're saying, I'm the same way with I think we're both at 47. It's that they're coming so fast, it's just overwhelming. It's just too much. And so it's just like, just stop, pick one, just pick one. Can we talk about just one? But I think what's also difficult for someone with a high improvise is that it's still coming from a place of experience and education. It's not just whim. So like if I come up with an idea, it's because it's still based off of experience, work time, like it's not just let's just build a flat house with no roof. It's just still coming from a place of validity. And that's sometimes hard for people to grasp because they're coming so fast in so many places, but there's still a sense of, it's still a good idea, that it comes with that. But I think for some, it's just like you're saying, for me, it comes all over and it takes me into different tangents. And sometimes I just have to learn, write them down and bring them up later because it's just too many things for one person at one time.
Okay, thank you.
You've got Elle with a hand up too, Paul.
Hey, Elle.
Hey, thank you for that. It's nice to be here and participate. I'm fairly new to Instinctive Drives. I mean, I think I did my ID back in September, and to be honest, I haven't really looked at it since then. I've just been so busy.
Okay.
But just listening to everyone, so I'm a avoid improvise, but within my organization, Cisco, I did when I first joined the company, I forget what they call it, but there's like a little tool that you have to use and fill out, and it's something that your manager uses, and it gives you kind of like it rates you, like, are you, a teacher or a leader,
Stand
things
out.
like that.
Stand out.
Right, and so I was considered a creative and a teacher. But with the Instinctive Drives, I've got avoid improvise. So I'm kind of like a mix of the two because I'm comfortable improvising, but also because of my background and the role that I'm in, I've got a lot of experience in it. I've been doing it for a long time. And so I'm comfortable following my instincts and based on my skills and my experience. But at the same time, I'm also comfortable improvising. So I don't know, I think I'm sort of like in the middle. And there's things that I do outside of work that are really, creative, where I'm improvising and coming up with new ideas. So I just thought I'd mention that because I'm listening to everyone and I realize I need to learn more about my ID.
Yeah, it's a great point, Ellen. Thank you for sharing. It probably a way of answering it across all IDs. It's like when I heard someone saying before about as an avoid complete person, you're still a planner, and yes, but if you saw the way you plan compared to a completer, it would be like kindergarten planning. You know what I mean? Like a completer plans with so much more detail, and not just on the thing, but while they're doing the thing that you might be focused on too, they're also keeping everything else in check and planned and organized and so on. So it's we use the same word like planning, and in this case, we can use the same word improvising. But when you look at, like, every human being does improvise, even avoid improvisers improvise. But you've got to look at a couple of things. One, what does it do to you? Is it energizing? Is it the sort of thing you're doing? And then like when you get a break from it, it's like, oh, good, I'm glad that's done now. We got out of it, but I'm glad we've sort of got back to normal. But also it might be something you were doing for the thing, but then you're not improvising on everything else. Whereas when you talk to someone who's a strong improviser, they're improvising on the thing, they're improvising on the next thing, they're improvising on the next conversation. It's like it permeates everything they do. And so
I get it. Okay.
Yeah, that's really the difference. But when it's a bit like what Dennis was saying before. If you're the one in control of the planning, if you're the one in control of the improvising, and you can select when you're doing it, how you're doing it, it's a lot easier for you to do the things that are seemingly not your natural style when you're the one in control of it,
Totally true. I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
I don't consider myself a control freak at all. However, things are easier and less stressful when you are in control versus when, like, it's really, I could just use one example. In business, oftentimes you're doing like what's referred to as a quarterly business review. I've been in situations where someone else was normally in charge of that. And this isn't in Cisco, in another organization where someone else was in charge of it, and then they were dictating how they wanted that done. And that's hard to do from my perspective when you have to rely on someone else's reporting. It's much easier for me when I'm in the driver's seat I'm the one who's pulling the reporting. I can understand the data, and then I'm the one who's delivering it. It's hard when you've got someone else who's trying to control. I had a boss in a previous job that was a total control freak, and that was hard and stressful. So I totally understand what you're saying.
Yeah, and that's the difference, that when you are wired to be an improviser, then you are, it's not just that you are improvising, you're driven to do it. Like even when you don't have to do it, you do it. You put yourself in situations, like no one says to you, can you have that done for me within the next hour? But you voluntarily, instinctively will just say, I'll get it done for you now. And then as the words are coming out of your mouth, you're still having that holy shit moment of like, why did I just say that? I've got all these other things I'm meant to do. Now I have to figure it out and improvise, and you do it all to yourself. That's what we mean by it's instinctive and it's natural, and it's like a river that's just flowing through you. So there's the behavior of improvising, and then there's the drive that's flowing through you all the time. And that's the difference. So, and the same is true of the planning or of the doing. If you're an authenticator, I mean, we all do, just like we all finish things at times, but are you doing it as a thing, or is it what flows through you all the time? All of us can pay attention to detail, but do you do it on everything? If you're out mowing the lawn, attention to detail isn't just that you mowed it a certain way. It's the height of the grass. It's the time of the day. It's like the type of mower you have. Like it goes beyond just the thing. It's across everything.
Yep, that was helpful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for being here too, Elle. It's nice to see you here.
Yeah, sure. No, thank you. I'm so happy to be here for sure.
Thank you. Well, guys, we're right near the top of the hour. Does anyone have anything they're particularly hanging on to they want to share before we start to wrap? All right. Well, then in that case, let's bring today and bring 2022 in terms of this forum to a close. I got to say, for me, something that we started back at the beginning of COVID. So it was March of 2020. So that had basically all of 20, all of 21, and now all of 22. I had no idea we were starting something that would, continue to build this momentum and be such a fun, let alone valuable experience and community that so many of you have been a part of almost all the way through. And new people come along and now, join. And then there are some people that were there, and they'll drop out for 6 months and they still come back and they're like, I have a good, it's like coming home every time I join and having these. I think it's not only the insights, I think it's the authenticity and the vulnerability, the honesty that people share, and the learnings, whether it's about someone with a similar idea, or whether it's just about other people, so that you get clued into people that you're living with or working with that maybe help you as well. It's a really valuable group for me too. I continue to be challenged by you guys, inspired by you, get feedback from you that helps me learn more about myself. So for me too, it's been a really valuable experience, and I truly value this community that's evolved here as something, one of the richest parts of our overall, company framework. So thank you for making it the joy that it is each and every fortnight. Have a wonderful Christmas. Have a great break over the holidays. And here's to us all sharing a really rewarding and fulfilling and exciting 2023 together. Stay safe, everybody. Take care.
Merry
Christmas.
Thank you.